I'm Dr. Michael Harrison, and I want to start with a story that still stays with me after all these years. About 8 years ago, I treated a woman named Eleanor. She was 72, sharp as anyone I'd ever met, living alone by choice, completely independent. She drove herself to book club every Tuesday, walked 3 miles every morning, and managed her own finances without a second thought. One evening, she was making dinner when she felt dizzy. Nothing alarming at first, just a little lightheadedness. She decided to sit down on her kitchen floor until it passed. But it didn't pass, and her phone was charging in the bedroom. For almost 4 hours, Eleanor sat on that cold tile floor, unable to stand, unable to reach help. She survived. A neighbor noticed her kitchen light on at 2 in the morning and came to check. But those 4 hours changed everything for Eleanor. And honestly, they changed everything for me too. I remember sitting with her in the hospital the next morning. She looked at me and said something I've never forgotten. She said, "I always thought being independent meant not needing anyone. Now I realize it means making sure someone can reach you when you do need them." That distinction has shaped how I counsel every patient since. Because in that moment I realized something I should have understood decades earlier. Independence is not the same as invulnerability. And for adults over 50 living alone, there is a gap between being capable and being prepared that most people never think about until it's too late. Today I want to close that gap for you. If you live alone, or if someone you love lives alone, this conversation could genuinely change the trajectory of an emergency, not through expensive equipment or complicated systems, through 5 simple preparations that protect your independence rather than threaten it. Sitting with me today is someone whose work has shaped how I think about aging, preparation, and dignity. Dr. Robert Chen spent 35 years as an emergency medicine physician, and the last decade researching senior safety outcomes. Doctor, thank you for being here. Thank you, Michael. This is a conversation I believe needs to happen more often, and I appreciate you bringing it to your audience because the people listening today, they're not fragile, they're independent, capable adults who simply deserve better information about protecting themselves. I've seen too many emergencies that could have unfolded very differently with simple preparation. That's exactly right, and I want to be clear about something before we go any further. This conversation is not about fear. It is not about treating your home like a hospital or assuming the worst is around every corner. This is about freedom, because here's what I've learned in 40 years of medicine. True independence isn't about refusing help. It's about making sure help can reach you when you need it. Dr. Chen, in your emergency medicine experience, what makes home emergencies particularly dangerous for adults living alone? The biggest danger is time. When someone lives alone, there is no witness, no immediate responder, no one to dial for help when things go wrong. And after 60, the body becomes less forgiving, recovery takes longer, balance is less reliable, blood pressure can shift quickly. A situation that might be uncomfortable for a younger person can become serious for someone older simply because of that time gap between incident and response. And this is where most people get it wrong. They assume emergencies are dramatic events, house fires, heart attacks, major falls, but in my experience most emergencies are quiet. A medication reaction that causes confusion, a drop in blood pressure that makes standing impossible, a fall where nothing breaks but you cannot get back up. I treated a man named Walter 2 years ago, 78 years old, former engineer, meticulous about everything in his life. He slipped getting out of the shower on a Tuesday afternoon. No broken bones, just couldn't get his footing on the wet floor. He spent 6 hours on that bathroom tile before his daughter called to check in and realized something was wrong. 6 hours. For a slip that caused no injury at all. These quiet emergencies are actually more dangerous because they don't announce themselves. By the time you realize you need help, reaching that help can feel impossible. That's exactly what the research shows. Studies on senior emergency outcomes consistently find that the first 10 to 15 minutes determine severity more than anything else, not the fall itself, not the underlying condition, but what happens immediately after. The data from the Journal of Emergency Medicine shows that response time is the single greatest predictor of outcome for adults over 65 experiencing non-traumatic emergencies at home. So the question becomes not whether something might happen, but whether you've prepared for what happens next. And that's what we're going to walk through together today. 5 preparations, 5 items for an emergency readiness kit that could protect your independence when it matters most. Now I want to be clear, these are not expensive, these are not complicated. You could assemble everything we discussed today in an afternoon, but each item serves a specific purpose, and understanding that purpose matters as much as having the item itself. Dr. Chen, before we begin, What is the single biggest mistake you see seniors make when thinking about emergency preparation? They prepare based on their good days. They imagine themselves alert, standing, phone in hand, able to explain exactly what's happening. But real emergencies rarely happen that way. They happen when you're half asleep, when you're disoriented, when your body isn't cooperating with what your mind wants to do. I cannot tell you how many patients I've treated who said they never imagined they wouldn't be able to simply stand up and walk to the phone. That's such an important point because I've seen this pattern hundreds of times. Patients who had emergency numbers on the refrigerator but were on the floor in another room when they needed them. Patients who assumed their phone would always be within reach. Patients who thought clarity would be automatic when stress made everything blur. The preparations we're discussing today assume limitation, not strength. They work when you cannot stand. They work when you cannot see clearly. They work when your thoughts are scattered and your hands are shaking. And that distinction matters, because preparation built for your worst moment will protect you. Preparation built for your best moment will fail when you need it most. So let's begin. And I want everyone listening to stay with us through all 5 items because they work together. Miss one piece and the entire system weakens. The first item might surprise some people because it's not complicated or high-tech, but in my 40 years of practice, I've seen this single preparation save more lives than almost anything else. Dr. Chen, what is the first item, and why does it matter so much? The first item is a wearable emergency alert device. Not a phone, not a smart speaker across the room, something that stays on your body and works even when you cannot stand, speak loudly, or see clearly. I want to pause on this because many people assume their smartphone solves this problem, but phones are fragile solutions. They need charging. They get left in other rooms. They fall out of reach. When my patient Eleanor was on her kitchen floor, her phone was 15 feet away in the bedroom. It might as well have been 15 miles. A wearable alert device removes location from the equation entirely. It's on your wrist or around your neck. It goes where you go. And when you press that button, help begins moving toward you immediately. The research on this is compelling. Studies consistently show that wearable alert systems reduce emergency response time dramatically, particularly for falls, which remain the leading cause of injury-related emergencies for adults over 60. The American Geriatric Society has documented that falls account for over 3 million emergency department visits annually among older adults. Having immediate access to help changes outcomes significantly. And here's what I want you to understand. This is not a symbol of weakness. This is not admitting defeat. A wearable alert is simply a backup voice when your own voice cannot reach far enough. It's no different than keeping a fire extinguisher in your kitchen or wearing a seatbelt in your car. We don't consider those preparations signs of fear. We consider them common sense. Dr. Chen, why do seniors who use these devices often report feeling calmer, not more anxious? Because the nervous system relaxes when it knows support is accessible. This is basic neuroscience. When your brain believes help is unreachable, it stays in a low-level stress state constantly. Cortisol levels remain elevated, sleep becomes disrupted, but when you know that pressing a single button connects you to assistance, that background tension dissolves. I've seen patients sleep better after getting these devices, move with more confidence, take healthy risks like going for walks alone because they know a safety net exists if something goes wrong. One patient told me she started gardening again after years of avoiding it because she finally felt secure being outside alone. That's the paradox most people miss. Preparation doesn't increase anxiety, it reduces it. Knowing you're protected allows you to live more freely, not less. Now, I want to address something directly. Not all alert devices are equal. Some require monthly fees. Some work only within your home. Some connect to call centers while others go directly to 911. Before choosing one, understand what you're getting. Talk to your doctor, read reviews, make sure the device fits your actual life, not a generic version of senior living. The goal is simple. When you cannot reach help yourself, something on your body can reach help for you. That's the foundation everything else builds upon. Which brings us to the second item, because getting help to arrive is only half the problem. When responders walk through your door, they need to understand what they're dealing with. I've seen this go wrong too many times. A patient is unable to communicate clearly. Maybe they're disoriented. Maybe the emergency affects their speech. Responders are standing in the living room, trying to make fast decisions without knowing the most basic information about the person in front of them. Dr. Chen, when emergency responders arrive, what information matters most in those first critical minutes? Medical context. Not age, not address. They already have those. What they need is medical history. What conditions exist? What medications are being taken? What allergies could change treatment decisions? what existing heart conditions or blood disorders might affect intervention choices. Without this information, responders have to guess, and guessing wastes time. Sometimes guessing leads to the wrong medication being administered because no one knew what the patient was already taking. I've personally witnessed situations where a patient received a medication that interacted badly with something they were already on, simply because that information wasn't accessible. This brings us to the second item, a clearly written, easily accessible medical information card or folder. Now, some people hear this and think they're covered because their doctor has everything on file. But in an emergency, responders are not calling your doctor's office. They're working with what's in front of them. Your medical records at the hospital might take hours to access. Your phone might be locked. You might be unconscious or too confused to explain. A physical document removes all of this uncertainty. What should this document include? Current medications with dosages, major diagnoses, known allergies, especially drug allergies, emergency contact information for family members, your primary physician's name and number, any existing advance directives or healthcare proxy information. If you have a pacemaker or any implanted device, that should be noted clearly. If you've had recent surgeries or procedures, include those as well. Keep this document somewhere obvious. Some people tape it inside a kitchen cabinet, others keep it by the front door or refrigerator. The location matters less than the accessibility. If a stranger walked into your home during an emergency, could they find this information within 60 seconds? And I want to add something important here. This isn't just about medical efficiency. It's about protecting your voice when you cannot speak for yourself. Having this information prepared means your wishes and needs are communicated even if you cannot communicate them. Dr. Chen, how does having this prepared change the emotional experience for seniors? It restores dignity. Patients tell me they feel reassured knowing their wishes are documented. Their families feel relief, and responders can act with confidence instead of hesitation. Everyone involved benefits. There's also peace of mind that comes from knowing you've done everything possible to ensure the best outcome. I've seen the opposite too many times. Families scrambling to remember medication names, responders making educated guesses, patients receiving treatments that would have been avoided if someone had simply written down the relevant information ahead of time. 15 minutes with a pen and paper could prevent hours of confusion during an emergency. That's the second item, communication and clarity. The ability to call for help and the ability to guide that help when it arrives. But there's still a gap we haven't addressed. What happens in the minutes between pressing that alert button and help walking through the door? This is where the third item comes in. And it surprises people because it seems so ordinary. But in emergency medicine, we know that physiological stability in those waiting minutes can determine whether a situation stays manageable or becomes severe. Dr. Chen, what is the most overlooked risk factor during home emergencies after 60? Fluid and electrolyte imbalance. Many emergencies worsen not because of the initial injury, but because the body cannot maintain internal stability while waiting for help. After a fall, after illness, after a missed meal, the body becomes vulnerable to sudden drops in blood pressure, increases in heart rate, and worsening confusion. Seniors are particularly susceptible to these shifts because the body's regulatory systems become less efficient with age. This is something I've observed throughout my career. Patients whose conditions escalated unnecessarily because their body didn't have what it needed to stabilize during those critical minutes. I remember a patient named Robert, 68 years old, who fell in his garage. The fall itself was minor, but he'd skipped breakfast that morning. By the time help arrived 40 minutes later, his blood sugar had dropped, and his blood pressure was unstable. What should have been a simple check became a hospital admission. The third item is a small hydration and electrolyte support supply, designed specifically for emergencies. Not sugary drinks, not coffee, not soda. These can actually make things worse. Balanced electrolyte solutions or packets that can be mixed with water quickly and consumed safely if someone is conscious but weak. Why does this matter medically? Dehydration and electrolyte imbalance intensify symptoms like lightheadedness, confusion, and muscle weakness. In emergency medicine, we see many situations where simple fluid imbalance escalates what could have been a minor incident into something requiring extensive intervention. The body needs certain minerals to maintain blood pressure and nerve function. When those are depleted, everything becomes harder. And there's a psychological component here too. When the body feels even slightly more stable, panic decreases, heart rate settles, blood pressure steadies. The person waiting for help can think more clearly and communicate more effectively when responders arrive. This isn't about replacing medical care, it's about buying time safely. It's about giving your body what it needs to stay as stable as possible until professionals can take over. I want to be clear about something. If you are unconscious or unable to swallow safely, do not attempt to drink anything. This preparation is specifically for situations where you are alert but weakened, where standing is impossible, but you can still reach for something nearby. Keep these supplies somewhere accessible from floor level. Remember, we're preparing for your worst moment, not your best. If you fall and cannot stand, can you still reach your emergency supplies? That's the question worth asking about every item in this kit. So now we have communication, clarity, and stability protected. There's one more vulnerability most homes haven't addressed. What happens while you're waiting? Even when help is on the way, those minutes can feel like hours. And discomfort during that waiting period isn't just unpleasant, it can actually worsen outcomes. Dr. Chen, what physical challenges do seniors face while waiting for emergency assistance? Temperature regulation becomes difficult. Lying on a hard floor causes joint pain and muscle strain. Awkward positioning increases stress on the body. Cold surfaces can drop core temperature surprisingly quickly, especially for older adults whose circulation may already be compromised. Prolonged immobility can cause blood pressure instability and increased anxiety. The body interprets these discomforts as additional threats, which triggers more stress hormones and creates a cycle that worsens the overall situation. I've treated patients whose conditions worsened simply because they were lying on tile or hardwood for 45 minutes. Their bodies tensed against the cold and discomfort. Their blood pressure rose, their pain increased. By the time help arrived, what started as manageable had become complicated. This brings us to the fourth item, a simple comfort and positioning aid. This could be a lightweight blanket stored somewhere accessible, a cushion that can be reached from floor level, a large towel that can be placed under joints. This might sound like luxury, but it's actually medical necessity in disguise. People underestimate how much physical discomfort affects emergency outcomes. When the body is cold, stress hormones surge. When joints are pressed against hard surfaces, muscles tense and blood flow changes. When someone is stuck in an awkward position, breathing can become labored. Providing warmth, cushioning, and positioning support keeps the nervous system calmer and reduces the cascade of stress responses that can complicate an already difficult situation. And there's something else here that matters deeply: dignity, being able to cover yourself, being able to adjust your position slightly, being able to reduce your own discomfort while waiting. These things preserve a sense of control during a moment that otherwise feels entirely out of control. Dr. Chen, how does maintaining dignity during emergencies affect overall outcomes? It reduces panic, it preserves mental clarity, it helps people remain active participants in their own care rather than feeling helpless. And when responders arrive to find someone calm, warm, and positioned safely, they can focus immediately on treatment rather than first correcting preventable discomfort. I've seen this difference countless times. The patients who maintained some comfort and dignity during their wait recovered faster emotionally as well as physically. Store this item strategically. Think about where in your home you spend the most time. If you fell in your kitchen, could you reach a blanket? If you collapsed in your hallway, is there anything nearby that could provide cushioning? These are uncomfortable questions to ask, but asking them now could change everything later. That brings us to the fifth and final item, and in many ways, this one ties everything else together. We've talked about devices and documents and supplies, but there's one factor that determines whether any of this actually works when pressure is highest: the human mind under stress. I've watched patients who had excellent preparations still struggle because they couldn't think clearly in the moment. Names disappeared, sequences blurred, simple decisions felt impossible. This isn't weakness, this is biology. Stress narrows attention and disrupts memory retrieval. Dr. Chen, what is the final vulnerability we need to address? Cognitive disorientation during emergencies. Even seniors who are mentally sharp under normal circumstances can experience confusion, memory gaps, and difficulty organizing thoughts when the nervous system is activated by stress or injury. The brain prioritizes survival over clarity. Information that would be readily available during calm moments becomes inaccessible. This is why people forget their own phone numbers during crises or cannot remember their medication names despite taking them every day for years. This is why the fifth item exists: a simple, clearly written emergency action guide. Not a complicated checklist, not a binder full of procedures, just a single page or laminated card that answers the questions you might struggle to answer yourself. What do I do first? What do I say when someone answers? Where are my important items located? Who should be contacted? Why is having this written down so important? Because when instructions are external, the brain doesn't have to search for them internally. This reduces cognitive load during high-stress moments. Studies in emergency response consistently show that people perform better under pressure when they have visible prompts guiding their actions. Pilots use checklists for this exact reason. Surgeons do the same. There's no shame in acknowledging that stress affects thinking. I want you to imagine this scenario. You've fallen. You've pressed your alert button. Someone is on the line asking questions. Your heart is racing. Your mind is scattered. You know you should mention your blood thinner, but the name won't come. You know you have emergency contacts, but you can't remember where you wrote them. Now imagine the alternative. Your emergency guide is right there. You can see the medication name. You can see the phone numbers. You can see the steps you wrote for yourself when your mind was calm and clear. That guide becomes your external memory. When your internal memory falters, it preserves autonomy. With that guide, seniors remain active participants in their care. They can communicate clearly, provide accurate information, and feel less helpless. The guide doesn't replace their judgment. It supports it during moments when judgment is hardest to access. And when you look at the full picture, this final item connects everything else. It reminds you to use the alert device. It points responders to your medical information. It notes where your hydration supplies are stored. It reinforces the comfort measures you've prepared. This is not a collection of random items. This is a system. Each piece supports the others. Each piece assumes you might be limited in some way. Each piece is designed for your worst moment, not your best. Dr. Chen, how should people think about this emergency kit as a whole? As a quiet safety net, not a sign of decline, not an admission of fragility, simply a thoughtful preparation that acknowledges reality. Emergencies happen, bodies are unpredictable, and living alone means the gap between incident and response depends entirely on what you've prepared in advance. That's exactly right. And I want to bring this home with something that might feel uncomfortable but needs to be said. If something happened tonight, would your home explain you clearly to someone who has never met you before? That question matters more than people realize. Emergency responders don't just treat injuries, they read environments, they look for clues, they try to understand the person in front of them as quickly as possible. When your home tells a clear story, when your preparations are visible and accessible, decisions happen faster and with more confidence. This is what I mean when I say preparation protects independence. When you've done this work, you're not handing control to someone else. You're making sure that whoever helps you has what they need to help effectively. You remain the author of your own care, even when you cannot speak. There's one more thing I want to address directly. Many seniors resist these conversations because they feel like admitting decline, like saying out loud that something might go wrong somehow makes it more likely to happen. I understand that feeling. I've seen it in thousands of patients over 4 decades. But here's what I've also seen. Preparation doesn't invite disaster. It prevents small problems from becoming large ones. It's not pessimism. It's respect for life. It's honoring the years you've lived and protecting the years still ahead. The seniors I've treated who had these systems in place recovered faster, maintained more independence, and experienced less trauma around their emergencies. Not because the emergencies were different, because the response was better. And this applies whether you're 55 or 85, whether you live in a house or an apartment, whether you have family nearby or not, the principles remain the same. Dr. Chen, if someone listening today wanted to take action immediately, what would you suggest they start with? Start with communication. Get a wearable alert device that fits your life. Once you know help can reach you, everything else becomes possible. Then create your medical information document. Then gather your supplies. Then write your emergency guide. One step at a time. No rush, but no delays either. The best day to prepare was years ago. The second best day is today. That's the approach I recommend as well. Don't try to do everything at once, but don't put it off indefinitely either. This afternoon, you could write down your medications and emergency contacts. Tomorrow, you could research alert devices. By the end of the week, you could have the foundation of a system that protects you for years to come. And for those of you who have loved ones living alone, consider having this conversation with them, not from a place of worry or control, from a place of love and respect. Ask them if they've thought about these preparations. Offer to help gather information. Make it a collaborative project rather than a lecture about safety. I've seen families strengthen their relationships through these conversations, because when you help someone prepare, you're saying, I want you to remain independent. I want you to stay in control. I just want to make sure that if you need help, it can reach you. That's the message I hope everyone takes from today. Living alone after 50 is not about fear. It's about freedom with thoughtful support. When these 5 preparations are in place, that freedom becomes safer, calmer, and more sustainable. The real question isn't whether an emergency will happen. Time makes emergencies inevitable. The question is whether you've given yourself the tools to handle it with confidence when it does. I've been practicing medicine for over 40 years now. I've seen thousands of emergencies unfold, and the single biggest difference between outcomes that preserve independence and outcomes that compromise, it comes down to what was prepared before the incident occurred. Dr. Chen, any final thoughts for our listeners? Only this: preparation is not about expecting the worst. It is about ensuring that the good days you want to keep living are protected. Every one of these items exists so that one difficult hour doesn't undo years of independence you've worked to maintain. Your future self will thank you for taking action today. That's beautifully said. And I want to thank everyone who stayed with us through this conversation. If you found this helpful, if you learned something today that you can use, I would genuinely appreciate it if you subscribe to this channel. I release new content every week specifically designed to help people like you take control of your health and maintain your independence as you get older. No hype, no fear tactics, just practical information from a physician who has spent 40 years serving patients. Before you go, I want to leave you with one thought. Your home already has everything it needs to support your independence. Most of it is already there. The information in your head, the phone numbers you know, the people who care about you. All we've done today is talk about making those resources accessible when you might not be at your best. That's not complicated, it's not expensive, it's simply thoughtful. Take care of yourself, give yourself the gift of preparation, and know that doing so isn't about expecting something to go wrong. It's about making sure that if something does, you're not facing it alone. In our next conversation, I'm going to share a single change you can make in your home that reduces emergency confusion dramatically. It costs nothing. It requires no equipment, and most people already have it but don't realize what it can do. Until then, take care of yourself.